Hello there, my friend, and welcome to the CEO Soapbox Podcast. I am your host, Neda, and this is where we have honest, practical conversations about leadership, growth, execution, and the decisions that shape the business behind the scenes. Today, we're going to talk about feedback, not the fluffy kind, not the let's all be nice and whole performance improves kind, and not the brutal kind either, because I don't believe that's leadership, where someone drops a truth bomb, calls it honesty, and leaves the other person bleeding on the floor. We're talking about the feedback that doesn't create fear, but still lands. Because this is one of the biggest challenges I see business leaders, CEOs, founders, MDs, that kind of business leaders and business owners face. They usually know what needs to be said. That's not the problem. The real challenge is that they confuse feedback with conflict inside their body. So the moment the conversation feels uncomfortable, the leaders start managing the discomfort instead of managing the issue at hand. So they start having these internal conversations. Will they take it personally? Will they still like me? Will this damage the relationship? Will they leave? Will I sound too harsh? Am I being unfair? What if I am part of the problem too? Which is all fair. And because of all of that though, the message gets softened, delayed, over-explained, or wrapped in so much niceness that the person walks away thinking, wow, I'm the best thing that happened to this business. Meanwhile, the business keeps paying for the behavior. So, in this episode, I want to help you. I want to raise three things, and hopefully it's going to help you too. First, I want to talk about where the feedback avoidance quietly shows up in your business. Second, we understand what is costing you commercially and operationally, and trust me, emotionally as well, but we're not going to talk about emotional component of it. And third, give you one practical way to deliver feedback this week without making it personal, dramatic, or useless. I'm going to share exactly what I do it, how I help, and you can use it too. Because good feedback is not about being harsh. Absolutely. It's also not about being nice. It's about being clear with that person on the all of this discomfort that you're feeling. And that's a very different leadership skill. So let's get into where this usually shows up. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say you have a senior person in the business. They are capable, they care, they're not a bad hire, lazy or not, they're not toxic. But let's say their communication is poor. What I mean by that is, for example, they don't update people early enough, or they leave things unclear. The worst thing, they assume others know what's happening. They miss details in the handover. And because of that, then the rest of the team keeps circling back, chasing information, fixing errors, calming clients, and try to guess what the hell is going on. Now, you can see the pattern, right, as a business leader. You've probably seen it for weeks, maybe months. And you said something, sort of. You've said, can you just keep the team a bit more across things? Or maybe be a little more mindful of the communication. Or just make sure everyone's aligned. And this person, not. They say yes. They walk away thinking, okay, I need to communicate a bit better. But nothing really changes. Because what you said was too soft to be useful. What you meant to say was the poor communication between the team or handover is causing rework, confusing the team, and damaging client confidence. That is the actual challenge. That's the actual issue. But that's not what came out of your mouth. And that gap, my friend, is where businesses get messy. Not because the leader doesn't care, not because the person receiving the feedback is hopeless, but because the feedback never landed clearly enough to change anything. We need to be fair. The person heard a preference from you. but the business needs a correction of behavior. And those two things are not the same. This happens all the time inside businesses. A project manager keeps missing follow-up. A sales leader keeps overpromising. An operations manager keeps escalating too late. A team member keeps bringing problems without thinking through options. A senior hire keeps creating tension because they talk down to people. And instead of naming the behavior and the business impact, a leader dance around it. They try to preserve the relationship. They try to keep the peace. They try not to make it a big deal, but the issue is already a big deal. It's just being paid for quietly in the business. And that's where we need to talk about what's really going on underneath all this. You see, I've seen most leaders don't avoid feedback because they're weak. They avoid it because they're trying to avoid the emotional risk of that conversation. And I get that. When you run a business, relationships matter. Trust matters. Business culture matters. You don't want people walking around scared. You don't want to become the leader everyone avoids. You don't want every feedback conversation to feel like a performance warning. That's fair. But my friend, avoiding clarity does not create psychological safety in the business. It creates confusion. People start wondering where they stand. Your high performance start getting frustrated because they can see standards slipping by other people. Managers start making excuses because no one has drawn the line clearly. And the person with the actual issue is often the last person to understand the real impact of what they're doing. And that's not kindness. That's just leadership discomfort, wearing a nice outfit. I'm going to tell you something. I believe avoiding feedback doesn't protect people. It protects the leader's discomfort. It's all about them. It's got nothing to do with people. It becomes very personal to them. And that matters to understand, because if you are the CEO, business leader, business owner, your discomfort cannot become an operating system in the business. The standard cannot be, we only say the hard things when it becomes impossible to avoid. That's not the standard. By then, the issue has already spread. The team has adapted around it. The client has felt it. The margin has absorbed it. And your best people have probably had 3 private conversations about it. Now, the other trap is going too far the other way. Some leaders do say the truth, but they say it when they're already pissed off. And they say it harshly. So the feedback, comes out loaded. The words, like what's actually happening, might be accurate, but the energy behind it is frustration, judgment, disappointment, and impatience. And that's when the feedback starts creating fear. Because the person doesn't just hear the issue. No, sirree, they hear, you failed, you're the problem, I'm angry with you, I don't trust you, you're not good at what you do. And once someone feels personally attacked, they stop listening for the business lesson and they start defending themselves. And that's normal. That's human. You do exactly the same thing. So the challenge is not choosing between soft or harsh, because both create problems. You go too soft, the message doesn't land. You go too hard or blunt, the person shuts down. The leadership skill is being direct without being careless. Clear without being cold. Honest without turning the person into the problem. That's where the good feedback lives. And when leaders don't build that muscle, the cost is not emotional. It becomes commercial very quickly. So I'm going to make this practical. A poor feedback does not usually shows up on the P&L as an item number called feedback avoidance. It doesn't. It hides under different names. It hides under rework, on the delays, on the escalation, on the client churn, on the missed deadlines, on your manager's frustration. It hides under team drama, low accountability, founder's dependency, margin leakage. You don't see a line item in the P&L that says, lost $40,000 because we were too uncomfortable to tell the vague pants that their handovers are a mess. But the cost is there. It shows up when 3 people, 3 resources, are fixing what one person should have done properly. It shows up when your senior people spend their week managing avoidable confusion instead of moving the business forward. It shows up when the client loses confidence because the business looks messy and unorganized. It shows up when the standard becomes optional because nobody wants to have the conversation. This is one of the most expensive parts of poor leadership discipline. Not because one awkward conversation was avoided, because avoiding it teaches the business how to behave. It teaches people that unclear work will be tolerated. It teaches your managers that escalation is safer than ownership. It teaches your high performance, your good people, that the standards depend on personality, not business or their role expectations. That's a terrible trade, my friend, especially in a growing small to medium-sized businesses. As the business grows, every unclear standards get amplified. You see, a small communication issue in a team of 2 or 5 is annoying. The same issue in a team of 20 or 50 becomes operational drag. The same issue across department becomes margin pressure. The same issue with the client becomes reputation risk. And this is where the CEOs often get trapped, or leaders, business leaders, I should say, get trapped. They think they have a people problem. And to be honest, sometimes you do, but that's not the conversation today. Often the issue is a clarity problem. You see, the person was never told clearly what behavior needs to change, why it matters, and what impact it's having, and what standards is expected from here. So everyone keeps hoping the person will get it. Hope is not a management system, my friend. If you want a business that performs better, scales cleaner, and depends less on you personally carrying the hard conversations, feedback cannot be random. It cannot depend on your mood and how it makes you feel. Your feelings are valid. I'm not saying your feelings are not valid. You're human after all. But it cannot depend on whether the issue has become painful enough. It has to be part of how the business protects standard, performance, trust, and execution. So the shift is very simple. Not easy, but it's simple. And the shift is this. I want you to stop treating feedback as a confrontation. And I want you to start treating it as a business correction. A correction is not an attack. It shouldn't be. It's not a character judgment. It's not a leadership performance. It's a clear conversation about the behavior, impact, and what needs to change. That's it. So I'm going to give you I believe a good feedback requires 4 things. First of all is the courage to name the issue. That's very important. And then the presence to stay calm when talking about the issue and being factual. Then the discipline to stay with it, to explain the impact. And the most important thing, the maturity to keep it about the behavior and not the person itself. That's where most leaders need to tighten up. Because feedback gets messy when it becomes vague, emotional, delayed, and worst of all, personal. Vague sounds like you need to communicate better. And that's it. You think I've said it. Personal sounds like you're not a team player And I really hope, and I don't think you do it, my listeners definitely will not say someone on 2026, a business leader, hopefully will not tell someone you're not a team player. Emotional sounds like, I'm really frustrated because this keeps happening. Delayed sounds like, I've been meaning to raise this for a while. None of these are strong enough. And some of them create more defensiveness than clarity, my friend. I'm going to give you a clear version that I used, and this is actually a real life example. So it came out because we were doing a handover with the client, and the client was going to be there with the team, part of this handover. So the information wasn't there. So this is the feedback I gave. In yesterday's client handover, the operations team didn't receive the update scope before this meeting with the client. That meant the team had to answer question with incomplete information, and we looked less prepared than we should have. Going forward, I need the final scope shared with the team at least 3 days before the handover with the client. You see, that wasn't fluffy, and I wasn't cruel. Then I named the situation, I talked about the behavior and the impact and what is going to be the standard moving forward. There was no drama, no character attack, no 10-minute speech, and not hiding the real issue under just be more mindful. This is the difference between the feedback that creates fear and feedback that creates clarity, what is expected. And that's fair, and the person requires this fairness. You need to be fair for them to be better, to do better. Fear-based feedback makes people feel unsafe because it attacks them. It attacks their identity. Clear feedback gives people something they can actually work with. And yes, I know you're saying, but Neda, some people will still react. Yeah, they do. Some people will get defensive. Some people will explain. Some people will say they were busy, misunderstood, unsupported, or blaming it on someone else. That doesn't mean you failed when you had that conversation. It means you are in a real conversation with the human. Your job is not to control every emotion or reaction. This is what I learned when I have my 3-year-old. One of the things I learned is that emotional reaction, it belongs to them. I need to validate it. I understand that. But it's not my job to control it. Your job is to stay anchored to what you said and what the standard requirement is. You can listen, and you should listen. You can and you should understand the context. You can own and you should own your part if the business has contributed to the problem. But do not abandon the message just because the room got uncomfortable. Some leaders, this matters even more. You see, if you're a small to medium-sized businesses, it matters more because you do not have endless layers to absorb the poor clarity. You don't have, endless funding. You feel it faster. You feel it in the team, in the clients, in your numbers, in your own head at 10 p.m. So let's make this useful for this week. We're going to talk about one action, not giant leadership model change, not workshop. One thing that you can actually use. So this week, if you don't have any of these issues, you're very lucky. You're probably a unicorn, but if you have people in your business, you will have this. So choose one feedback conversation you have been avoiding or softening, not 5 of them, just one. I want you to pick the one where you already know the issue, but you have been dancing around it. Before you have this conversation, though, I want you to answer these 4 questions and write it down. Number 1, what happened? I want you to name a specific. I'm going to go through it. What was the behavior? I want you to describe what they did or didn't do. Don't label. There's no personality judgment here, okay? Then I want you to write what was the business impact. You need to explain the consequences and what needs to happen from here. Name the standard or your next action clearly to them. That's it. 4 lines. Like when we talked about on Monday, project call, the updated delivery risk wasn't raised until the client asked directly. So the impact, what that meant, the team was caught off guard and we looked reactive. So remember, we said from now on, from here, I need delivery risk flagged internally before client meeting, even the issue is not fully resolved yet. Then stop talking. This is important. Do not bury the feedback under some motivational speech, okay? Do not add 12 cushions around it. Do not end, but overall, you're doing amazing. Keep it about the topic. You see, when you over cushion feedback, people often remember the cushions and miss the correction. You can be warm. You should be. You have to be respectful. You can be human in this, but stay clear. And what I want you to do is when you talked about the 4 line we talked about, you answer all this and be very factual, be very clear. I want you to ask one useful question of this person. What support do you need to meet the standard from here? That question keeps the conversation constructive without letting the person dodge accountability. It also helps you see whether this is capability issue, clarity issue, workload issue, or an ownership issue. Because sometimes feedback reveals something bigger picture. Maybe the person didn't know the standard. Maybe you're educating about the policies and processes is lacking. Maybe the whole process of handover is broken in this case. Maybe the manager above them is unclear in any situation that we're talking about. Maybe they don't have authority they need. Maybe they're simply not operating at the level the role requires. All of that is useful information. But you will not get there if the feedback is so soft and so nice that no one knows what's actually being discussed. So this week, one conversation, write down answers to this 4th question, and one clear standard. That alone will put you ahead of a lot of leaders, my friend, who keep hoping performance improves through vibes and patience. And honestly, that's not a strategy. So the big takeaway today is this. Feedback does not create fear because it's clear. Feedback creates fear when it's personal, loaded, inconsistent, delayed, or delivered only when the leader has finally had enough. Clear feedback is not the enemy of trust. Done properly, it protects trust because people know where they stand. You know that, right? They know what matters. They know what needs to change. And your best people can see that standards actually mean something in your business. You need to protect your best people, my friend. And as a CEO, founder, MD, business owner, leader, your job is not to make every conversation comfortable. Your job is to make the business clearer to lead, easier to run, and stronger in how it performs. That includes having the conversation before the issue becomes a drama. That includes naming behavior and impact without making it personal. This is the kind of work I care deeply about. I love working with CEOs about this. So if this episode hit close to home and you know your business needs stronger leadership rhythm, clear standard, and better execution without adding more noise, reach out to me on LinkedIn. The right conversation can save a lot of messy ones later. All right, that's it for us for today. Wishing you an amazing week ahead. Until next time, stay curious and stay kind, especially to yourself. Bye for now, my friend.